Danielle's life before Terence, a mother's strength and silent struggles. Danielle Harris's story begins not with her tragedy, with her resilience. At 45 years old, she was a woman who had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and the crushing weight of responsibility. To those who knew her best, Danielle was the kind of woman who carried herself with quiet dignity. She was an African-American nurse from Virginia, a woman who had built her career in the chaotic environment of emergency medicine. In the hospital, she was the steady hand when others faltered. Patients and colleagues alike recognized her as someone who could remain calm in the storm, someone who could shoulder chaos without breaking. But once she left the fluorescent-lit corridors of the ER, her own life was far from calm. For 17 years, Danielle had been married to Andre Harris. In the beginning, their marriage was like any young couple's, built on shared dreams and promises, whispered in the dark. They imagined a future where stability was certain, where love would be enough to keep them grounded through life's storms. Was once a man she trusted with everything. But the version of him she had married slowly unraveled over the years. Fidelity crept into their marriage like poison. Financial mismanagement eroded the foundation they had built together. Lies stacked up, one after another. Danielle no longer recognized the man sitting across the dinner table. She tried to hold on. For years, Danielle convinced herself that things would get better, that love could patch the cracks in their marriage. Looked the other way when the evidence of Andre's betrayal surfaced, telling herself that commitment meant forgiveness. She clung to the hope that the man she had once loved would come back to her. But love, she learned the hard way, wasn't enough to save something that had already rotted at its core. By 2016, Danielle reached her breaking point. She couldn't pretend anymore. Was brutal, long, drawn out, and bitter. Andre walked away without much of a fight, leaving her with the crushing responsibility of raising their 2 children, Jason and Ava, alone. He did not look back. For Danielle, the legal battles felt endless. She fought fiercely, not for herself, but for her children. Every document she signed, every court appearance she endured, was another reminder that her life as she had known it was over. When the judge granted her full custody, Danielle promised Jason and Ava that no matter how broken she felt inside, she would never let them feel abandoned. Motherhood became her lifeline. She poured everything she had into her children. Jason, her eldest, was quiet and thoughtful, already beginning to shoulder the weight of responsibility too early for his age. Ava, still in her teens, leaned on her mother for stability and guidance. Danielle's life became a cycle of hospital shifts, late-night assignments, and the relentless demands of single parenting. Needs came last, always last. She sacrificed her time, her energy, and the remnants of her dreams to ensure her children never felt the absence their father had left behind. But that sacrifice came with a cost. Inside, Danielle carried wounds that never fully healed. Every time she stepped into her apartment at the end of a long shift, the silence pressed against her chest. The memories of her broken marriage lingered like ghosts in the room. No matter how much she tried to convince herself she was strong, betrayal had left scars that shaped the way she saw the world. Danielle vowed never to give another man the kind of power Andre had once held over her. She told herself she would never allow anyone to control her again. Trusting someone else with her heart felt impossible. The idea of putting her future in someone else's hands was terrifying. Love had once promised her stability, only to leave her with nothing but scars. It was easier to bury herself in work, to hide behind the role of mother and nurse, than to take the risk of being vulnerable again. But loneliness has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. By late 2021, after years of moving through life like a shadow, Danielle found herself scrolling through her phone one quiet evening. The children were asleep. The apartment was silent. The exhaustion of her shift weighed on her. But there was also something else. A deep ache. A reminder of how much of her life she had put on hold. She hadn't considered online dating before. The idea of opening herself up to a stranger felt strange, even dangerous. But that night, loneliness and curiosity blurred together. With cautious fingers, Danielle created a profile. She didn't write much. Just a few words about her hobbies, love for her children, her career in nursing. Nothing too detailed. Just enough to give a glimpse into the woman she still was. Beneath the exhaustion, she didn't expect anything from it. If anything, it felt like a small act of defiance against the loneliness that had claimed so much of her life. The next morning, a message appeared in her inbox. "Hey, how's your day going?" It was from a man named Terrence Cole, year-old IT engineer from Houston, Texas. Danielle almost ignored it. She had no energy for polite small talk, no patience for someone who might turn out to be just another disappointment. But there was something about the simplicity of his words that made her pause, demanding or overbearing. Just polite, casual. A quiet invitation. Against her better judgment, she replied. That one message turned into a conversation. The conversation turned into another, then another. Over the next few days, Danielle and Terrence began to share pieces of their lives. At first, it was small talk. Work, family, the day-to-day frustrations everyone experiences. Their conversations grew deeper. Terrence spoke about growing up in Houston, about the struggles he faced with his own family, his dreams of building a better life. Danielle, cautious but slowly softening, began to open up in return. She told him about her failed marriage, the betrayal, the years of raising her children alone. She confessed the exhaustion of carrying so much on her shoulders. Terrence listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush her. He seemed patient, understanding, even gentle. For the first time in years, Danielle felt like someone truly saw her, not just as a nurse, not just as a mother, but as a woman. She began to look forward to their late night calls, to the way his voice softened when he asked how her day had gone. It was a small flicker of hope in a heart that had long been convinced that love wasn't worth the risk. Her best friend, Tasha, the change immediately. Over coffee one afternoon, she teased Danielle. "You've been glowing lately." "Who is he?" Danielle laughed, but also relieved to admit the truth. "His name's Terrence. He's different, Tasha. He listens. He makes me feel like I matter again." Tasha's smile was warm, but her warning was gentle. "Just make sure he's not wearing a mask." Happiness, Danielle. But don't ignore the signs if something feels wrong. For the first time in a long time, Danielle felt a spark of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could risk trusting again. Maybe this was her chance to rewrite the ending of her story. But behind that flicker of hope, a question lingered in her mind. Could words on a screen and a voice on the phone truly reveal who someone was? Cole be as genuine as he seemed? Or was she about to open the door to something far darker than she could imagine? The relationship with Terrence charmed Terrence to control. When Danielle first met Terrence in person, it felt like a dream she hadn't dared to believe in. Cautious texting, late-night calls, and guarded conversations, she boarded a plane to Houston in May of 2022. The thought of traveling to meet someone she'd only known online had filled her with nerves, but also with a quiet, stubborn hope. She was tired of living in the shadow of her past. Maybe this was her chance to step into the light again. At the airport, Terrence was waiting for her with a sign that had her name written in bold letters, just like something out of a romantic movie. He was smiling when she walked toward him, his eyes shining with the warmth of recognition. For a brief moment, all of Danielle's doubts melted away. He was exactly as she had imagined from their conversations. Polished, confident, attentive. He leaned in for a hug, and she allowed herself to breathe. Maybe this was real. Their first dinner together felt effortless. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but Danielle barely noticed, hung on her every word, asking questions about her childhood, her career, her dreams. He told her about his own struggles growing up in Houston, about his work as an IT engineer, about the loneliness he had felt before meeting her. Danielle laughed more that evening than she had in years. Time in so long, she felt like a woman again. Not just a mother, not just a nurse, but someone who was seen, heard, and desired. The weekend unfolded like a fairy tale. Terrence was attentive to the smallest details. At breakfast, he had already made coffee exactly the way she liked it. When they walked down quiet Houston streets late at night, he reached for her hand with a kind of confidence that made her feel safe. He opened doors for her, paid for everything without hesitation, and made her feel cherished in ways she hadn't thought possible anymore. Her guard, built after years of betrayal, began to lower. Terrence seemed perfect, almost too perfect. Yet, when Danielle looked into his eyes, she saw sincerity. She wanted to believe in it. She wanted to believe that this was her second chance at love. But beneath the charm flickered. First, it was so subtle Danielle dismissed it as nothing. When she checked her phone during breakfast to reply to her daughter Ava's texts, Terrence's smile faltered for a second. His brow furrowed, almost imperceptibly. "Why do you have to talk to her so much while you're here?" he asked with a half smile. His tone light but edged with something sharp. Danielle was caught off guard. "She's just checking in," she replied softly. "She's been having a hard time at school. I just want to be sure she's okay." Terrence leaned back in his chair, his smile tight. "I get it. But you're here with me now. Don't you want to focus on us?" She brushed it off as insecurity. After all, everyone has their flaws. Maybe he just needed reassurance. But the small moments began to multiply. Every time Danielle reached for her phone, his eyes followed. She typed too long, his jaw clenched. If she smiled at a message, his tone shifted. At first, he framed his requests as simple favors. "Can you keep your phone face down while we're eating? I just want your attention." It sounded harmless, even sweet, but soon those requests became demands. "I don't want you distracted by anyone else," he told her one evening, his voice low, his gaze fixed on her. "You're with me. That should be enough." The warmth Danielle had felt began to cool. She recognized the pattern. Small controls disguised as devotion. She had heard similar words before. Years ago, from Andre. When her marriage began to crumble under manipulation, she told herself, Terrence wasn't like her ex-husband, that these were just moments of insecurity. But deep down, the knot in her stomach tightened. When she returned home from that first trip, Danielle tried to focus on the positives. Her children noticed her smile, her lighter mood. Jason teased her about having a boyfriend. And Ava hugged her tightly, whispering, "I'm glad you're happy, Mom." Danielle wanted to believe she was happy. She wanted to believe this relationship could be the beginning of something new. As weeks turned into months, Terrence's behavior grew more pronounced. He began calling her multiple times during her shifts, asking where she was, who she was with, why she hadn't replied faster. When she explained she was busy at work, he would sigh heavily, making her feel guilty. After work, if Danielle went out for coffee with a friend, Terrence would flood her phone with messages. "Who are you with? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I'm worried about you." At first, the words seemed protective. But the frequency, the tone, and the sheer persistence revealed something darker. He wasn't worried. He was monitoring her. Danielle started to feel suffocated. She journaled late at night, her words shaky, her thoughts heavy. "Is this love?" she wrote one evening. "Or am I losing myself again?" She recognized the signs, yet part of her clung to the hope that Terrence's love was genuine. After all, he had shown her tenderness, care, and attention. Couldn't that outweigh his flaws? But the small acts of control piled up like bricks, forming walls around her life. Terrence wanted to know her every move. He discouraged her from spending time with friends. He made subtle jabs about her colleagues, insisting they were a bad influence. And whenever she pushed back, he twisted her words into guilt. "Everything I've done for you, is it too much to ask for your full attention?" It was manipulation, disguised as devotion. Danielle's friends began to notice the change. Tasha, her closest confidante, confronted her one evening. "You've been distant, Danny. You don't come out with us anymore. And when you do, you're always checking your phone like you're afraid to miss his call." Danielle forced a smile. Inside, she knew Tasha was right. She was changing. Her world was shrinking. Terrence's love was becoming less like comfort and more like a cage. The breaking point came in late June of 2024. Danielle had been under immense stress, juggling her demanding shifts at the hospital, Terrence's relentless demands for attention, and the constant pressure of single motherhood. One evening, driving home after yet another argument over the phone with Terence, she lost focus. Her car swerved and crashed into a pole. The injuries were minor. The accident shook her deeply. It forced her to confront the truth. She was exhausted, drained, in a relationship that was breaking her down instead of building her up. On June 24th, Danielle finally made a decision. She sent Terence a long, carefully worded message. She told him she couldn't continue the relationship. She explained that it wasn't about blame, that she simply needed to protect her peace, her children, and her sanity. She asked him to respect her decision. At first, his response seemed calm. "Thank you for your honesty. I still love you, but I respect your choice. You find happiness." Danielle exhaled with relief. Maybe he had understood. Maybe it would end peacefully. But the relief didn't last. The next day, her phone was flooded with messages from Terence. At first, they were desperate pleas. "Please give me another chance. I'll change." To counseling. "I'll be better." Then they shifted into declarations. "We're meant to be. No one loves you like I do." This away. When Danielle didn't respond quickly, the tone turned darker. "You're leaving me. After everything I've done for you. Everything I've given you." The pattern was unmistakable: love, bombing, guilt, tripping, then anger. In his mind, Danielle's decision wasn't hers. It was an act of betrayal. And soon, he began to look for someone else to blame. Started mentioning her family, her mother, her sister, even her clients at the grooming salon. "They've turned you against me. They don't want you happy. They ruined us." Danielle read those words with a growing sense of dread. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was obsession, wasn't letting go. And as his messages grew more erratic, Danielle realized she hadn't just ended a relationship. She had triggered a storm that was about to consume everything she loved. The breaking point from love to obsession. By the time July 2024 arrived, Danielle Harris had made her decision clear. She no longer wanted to be with Terence Cole. She had ended things with him as calmly and respectfully as she could. But for Terence, rejection was not an end. It was an insult, an unbearable wound to his pride. In the weeks following Danielle's breakup message, his behavior spiraled from desperate to disturbing. At first, he sent her long messages promising to change. He told her he would go to therapy, that he could be a better man if only she gave him another chance. His words were filled with apologies, vows of transformation, writ pleas to rebuild what they had. Danielle, firm in her decision, kept her responses short and neutral. She refused to be drawn back into arguments. But Terence wasn't looking for closure. He was looking for control. Soon, his tone shifted. His texts were no longer about winning her back, but about punishing her for leaving. "You don't get to walk away from me," one message read. Accused her of betrayal. He told her she had oozed him, that she was just like everyone else who had abandoned him. And then his anger turned outward. He began blaming her family, particularly her mother and sister. In his mind, Danielle hadn't chosen to leave him on her own. Someone had poisoned her against him. It was a dangerous mental shift. In Terence's logic, if other people were the reason Danielle ended things, then removing those people would solve the problem. His obsession had now fused with a sense of twisted justification. Investigators would later discover the chilling proof of this shift in his internet history. Laptop revealed searches like "how to restrain someone," "what's the fastest way to end a life," and "best weapons for home defense." These weren't random curiosities, calculated steps in a plan. Terence was preparing for violence. He chose his weapon carefully: a crossbow, cheap enough to buy online, compared to a firearm, and deadly at close range. He ordered bolts, rope, duct tape, and even a field knife. Surveillance cameras captured him shopping in hardware stores, pausing in aisles as though calculating what materials would best serve his purpose. Purchase was a piece of his plan, assembled with deliberate care. By early July, had transformed from a heartbroken ex-boyfriend into a predator preparing for attack. He studied Carol Hunt's social media accounts, watching for signs of routine. He checked John Hunt's broadcasting schedule. ensuring the family's father would not be home during his chosen day. He even checked weather reports for July 9th, calculating how heat or rain might affect his movements. This was no crime of passion. This was premeditation. On the morning of July 9th, the small town of Bushey in Hertfordshire carried on as usual. It was a warm summer day, the kind where children rode bikes on quiet streets and neighbors trimmed their hedges. Nothing suggested that by evening, the town would be the center of a massive police operation. For Danielle and her family, it began as an ordinary day. Her sister Louise was at the house, tending to her small dog grooming business in the yard. Her mother Carol was home as well, moving about the kitchen. Their father, John Hunt, the well-known BBC horse racing commentator, was away at work. Hannah, the eldest daughter, but expected to return later in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Terence's morning appeared deceptively normal. Security cameras captured him running errands with family members, even smiling as he pushed a stroller outside a garden supply store. To the outside world, calm and cheerful. Just another young man enjoying a summer day. But inside, he was holding tightly to the plan he had been building for weeks. Around 1:30 p.m., he parked his car a block away from the Hunt's home. He carried only a small bag of belongings, leaving his weapons hidden nearby. He wanted to look harmless, perhaps even contrite, when he knocked on the door. His goal was to gain entry through Carol Hunt's kindness. The same kindness Danielle had always spoken about. At just before 2:00 p.m., walked up the path and rang the bell. Carol answered. Seeing her daughter's ex-boyfriend standing there, calm and polite, she likely saw no reason to be alarmed. He spoke softly, perhaps saying he only wanted to talk, to resolve things peacefully. Trusting his demeanor, she let him inside. The moment the door closed, the mask slipped. Terence attacked Carol first, pulling out a knife from his bag. The wounds to her chest and abdomen suggested a sudden, ferocious assault. Cuts on her arms and back revealed her desperate attempt to defend herself, overpowered her quickly. Within seconds, Carol lay fatally wounded. Leaving her behind, stepped back outside to retrieve the crossbow he had hidden. When he returned, he turned his attention to Louise, who had been inside after working in the yard. He tied her hands behind her back with duct tape, bound her legs, and gagged her with another strip. She screamed into the tape, but her cries were muffled. Louise, once the free, spirited animal lover who had built her own small business, was now utterly at his mercy. The horror didn't end there. For nearly 2 hours, Terence subjected Louise to unimaginable cruelty. Medical evidence later revealed prolonged suffering, the kind of injuries that told investigators this was not a swift attack. Out ordeal meant to dominate and dehumanize. Terence wasn't just trying to kill her. He was trying to break her spirit before ending her life. When Hannah returned home later that afternoon, she walked into the nightmare. She immediately saw Terence with the crossbow. Terrifying seconds, she tried to send a desperate message to her boyfriend. Kyle's here. He's tying us up. We need the police. It was her final act of bravery. Terence noticed her message before she could finish the call. He raised the crossbow and fired. The bolt struck Hannah fatally. She collapsed, but not instantly. With what little strength she had left, she managed to dial emergency services. Her voice was weak, broken, but still urgent. He's here. Crossbow. We're tied up. Can't breathe, not much time. Dispatchers tried to keep her on the line, asking if she could see him, if it was safe to stay. Hannah's responses were fragmented, but enough to trigger an immediate critical alert. When police arrived minutes later, the sight inside the Hunt's home froze even seasoned officers. Blood stained the floors. Carol and Louise were already gone. Hannah lay on the ground, still in her chest, gasping weakly. Medics rushed to save her, but she succumbed shortly after. The officers quickly pieced together what had happened: a methodical home invasion.